As Guts continues to fight Rosine the Elf Queen, their shared forced apathy for the events that have happened to them becomes more apparent, and we see a connection form there. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today I want to talk about a graphic novel that I read because I am back on that graphic novel grind. Today's graphic novel is all about holy knights and elf queens and whatnot. I am referring to Berserk Volume 16 by Kentaro Miura, which was published around 1997. I've already talked about Kentaro Miura on this channel before, so I don't need to go into that great of detail. Just know that he wrote the Berserk series. He adapted it into video games and movies and TV shows, all of which were of varying quality, but I particularly enjoyed the TV show that I watched pretty recently. And he wrote a couple of other things, and he's very well regarded in literature and manga circles as well. Pretty good author, and I've been enjoying the Berserk series very much, although I didn't enjoy some of the volumes after volume 13, I do think that the series is once again picking up, so very, very excited to see where it goes from here. But without further ado, let's talk about Berserk Volume 16. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So, Volume 16 of Berserk picks up with the Holy Cross Knights stumbling upon another field of bodies. This field of bodies were sort of the elf children who were killed by Guts in the previous volume, and they're shocked by it, and they start talking about Guts as though he is the Hawk of Darkness. What exactly that means? It remains to be seen, but it does suggest that they think that Guts is some sort of dark figure who might be in league with Femto. That's sort of my guess is what's going on there. But when the story goes back to Guts, we see that Guts is fighting Rosine still. And Jill, Rosine's former friend, is shocked by all of this and really scared of Guts. The art depicts him as some sort of fierce monster here. But he continues to fight, and he finally manages to nearly kill Rosine. As he's gonna launch the killing blow, Jill covers her body, and Guts kind of holds off on it, and he's shot by an arrow by the Holy Cross Knights, who have finally caught up to him. Guts kind of scurries away, so he won't have to fight these knights, and Jill kind of follows him. Like the Holy Cross Knights want to hold on to Jill because she is her father is traveling with them, and Jill doesn't want to be with her family because she doesn't really think there's a place for her and herself in the village anymore. But Jill manages to catch up to Guts, and she's like, "Take me with you." And Guts says, "Look around you. There's only darkness. There's only horror. This is not the place for you." And he's like, "Go fight your own battle." Presumably back in the village. And Guts leaves Jill behind at this point. Guts continues to travel. We see that some creatures of darkness are again surrounding him, and he seems to have a fear of becoming a beast himself, but he pushes all that aside, and I think Puck even helps him clear away some of the monsters that are trying to envelop him. At this point, Guts is arguing with Puck when the Holy Cross Knights once again show up. And Guts manages to fight many of them, killing a few of them, but they finally task another knight by the name of Azan, who's big and tough, with fighting Guts. Guts is weakened at this point. He also recognizes Azan as a former bridge knight who robbed people who tried to cross a bridge, and Guts kind of respects this knight. And it turns out that Guts is too weakened to really defeat Azan, and he tries to start slaughtering their leader, Lady Firenze, I believe is her name. However, before he can take down Lady Farnese, sorry, that was her real name, the Guts is taken down by the other knights. She in fact gets a blow into his shoulder, which knocks him out. And when Guts is woken up, he wakes up in the Holy Cross Knights sort of camp later. And he's questioned by Lady Farnese, wondering what he's doing. But rather than give Lady Farnese any answers, Guts sort of mocks her and her god that she believes in. She calls Guts a heretic and starts slashing him with a whip. At this point, some of the other knights show up and stop her from doing that because she might kill Guts, and Guts is put outside in the cold in the stocks. And as the story comes to a close, we see that Guts witnesses some more creatures of darkness amassing, suggesting another big fight's going to take place, and he is slightly concerned there. In terms of analysis, there is a few things worth talking about with Volume 16. One of the themes that Miura is talking about here is that of forced apathy. So Guts and Rosine in this story, they both have a sense of forced apathy, and they're similar in that they both kind of became colder, became harsher in order to survive. Guts's survival is the result of him losing the Band of the Hawk and having to take on all of these creatures of darkness, including the God Hand. So he's kind of like committed to this life of fighting these dark creatures, and it's sort of a sunk cost to him, as we find out in this story. Like he's rejected the world because he needs to reject the world. He's come this far, he can't allow anything to stop him, so he has to distance himself from those things. All of those things are what I've talked about in previous volumes, and I suggested it merely as a guess that Guts must be putting up a facade because he talks tough, but then you see like a sad look upon his face at times. And here, this particular volume does suggest that it is indeed a facade. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "Is her appearance distracting me, or is it Jill's story? Am I really such a softie? Look at me, at this mess. I went too easy on her, and now I can hardly hold my sword. Black it out, one more time. I'll take my urge to kill and black everything else out." And that's Guts sort of talking to himself in that moment as he's fighting Rosine. We see him sort of asking himself, like, am I such a softie? Like, am I allowing Rosine's backstory to get to me? And ultimately he says to himself, black it out. You can deal with these emotions later. All I have to do is give myself to my rage in this moment, and I can kill Rosine and move on from all of this. Which again suggests that all of this is a facade, that he's telling himself to leave his feelings behind in this moment, which he probably doesn't want to do, but he's forcing himself to do. This is not the real Guts. This is the result of having to fight all of these creatures of darkness, which is horrifying. And it's really good writing on Miura's part, because this man, Guts, has had to distance himself from his feelings his entire life, because he's only been brought up as a mercenary. He's only been brought up as someone who's had to fight, and he's never had a moment for himself, and so he's had to create this hard exterior so that nobody can take advantage of him. And this is more of that happening here, which is a very dynamic, interesting character in Guts. Rosine's backstory is just as tragic, being raised in an abusive family and then escaping to the forest in the hopes of finding elves, only to find that there were no elves and that her family has come to claim her and return her home. And so she wishes upon a bailet, which turns her into the Elf Queen. And she can't return home at this point. Even though Jill wants her to return home, Rosine can't, because she's sunk. This is a sunk cost for her as well. She has to take on this mask of apathy and sort of distance herself from everything, because she's already committed so many horrors. She's already murdered and taken away so many children that she can't return to that life. She can't claim what has been lost for her. And after Guts defeats her, she's like, oh, I'm just going to go to some other forest elsewhere. Like, if I can't be here, I can't return home, I might as well go continue what I'm doing elsewhere. So in that way, Rosine's story mirrors Guts, but Guts' story shows that there's a choice in the matter, that you do have an opportunity to sort of give up, or at least allow yourself to feel in certain moments, whereas Rosine's sort of evil nature comes from the fact that she's not allowing herself to do any of that, that she's given it into the temptation, much like Griffith has done, and the result is that there's only death awaiting her at this point. Miura is also talking about escape here. Many of the characters in this volume seek to get away from the horrors that they have been experiencing. Guts chooses to get away from these horrors by blacking out, as I just pointed out, and engaging in a great sense of violence towards the people who are trying to wrong him. And that works for him to some extent. Like, obviously he's never going to forget it, and he keeps, talking about these horrors that have been unfolded upon him, and how he has to be harsh as a result. And he even develops this harsh exterior in moments where he's like, oh, that person died because they're weak, I'm not so weak. And it's clear he doesn't actually believe that. But it works for him because it allows him to continue moving forward. But he's still in great pain, as we can see in this volume and in previous volumes. For Jill, Jill wants to escape as well. But there's a part where, she's trying to go with Guts, where Guts says, look around you, there's darkness everywhere, everything wants me dead, so everything's gonna want you dead, and I don't think you have what it takes to survive. And he's kind of right. Jill's not a warrior at heart. She would be yet another casualty in Guts' wake, I think, in this story. But he specifically says, go back to your village, go back to your battle, he says specifically, which is fascinating, because Guts is acknowledging, this battle of darkness is not for you, but helping your village, making your village become a better place for other children and whatnot, so that Rosine and your own story doesn't happen to others. That's kind of key. So, Guts is saying that Jill can fight in another sort of way, which I like about that. That's good writing on Miura's part. And then Rosine, she's also trying to escape, which she tried to use the Behelit, and it's clear that she can't escape because she's terrorized by memories of her family abusing her, but also of reaching the forest and finding out that the elves, as she thought they existed, weren't real, and that her family was coming to claim her again, so she wouldn't be able to escape that. And mentally, she's not able to do that. And so what I think Miura is saying here is that, and this is some of the words that Gus has been saying, is that there is no paradise away from the unavoidable. You have to face up to the trouble that's in your life. You have to acknowledge it and work to make it better, because if you try to run away, what happened to Guts might happen to you, or what happened to Rosine might happen to you, where you'll make a big mistake that will cost you your life as you know it. Another thing that I like about this particular volume is that, again, we see Guts through others' eyes, much like in the previous volume where Guts was murdering a bunch of elf children, and Jill was terrified by the entire thing. We see that a little bit again with Jill terrified as Guts is trying to kill Rosine. We see Guts in a shadowy sort of state, which is horrifying. He's really depicted as a monster here, very shadowy, as I mentioned before, and the art in general is just pretty high quality. So I do think that this is a pretty stellar sort of entry for the art of the series, and it's always good to see how others view Guts, because we know how he views himself, but others viewing Guts kind of reveals the sort of horrifying nature of this man who has like a bunch of broken bones and never seems to stop wanting to kill those that he has targeted. And the last thing I'll note is the little bit of storyline that is developing between Guts and Lady Farnese, who is the leader of the Holy Cross Knights. She's an interesting character in that she believes in a god, which Guts doesn't seem to support. Guts is frustrated that all he seems to have found is demons and devils and Griffith, terrifying monsters. So what is a god to a non-believer, as Kanye West has said, which, I don't like quoting Kanye West these days, but that's a good line from one of his songs. And so, like Guts is heretical in Lady Farness's eyes, because he openly says that her gods are hollow, that she can never hope to stand up against what he's experienced, what he's encountered in the world. And even though he's viewed as heretical, he is kind of right here, and that there doesn't seem to be a noble or heroic god in this world. There only seems to be suffering, death, and dangerous demons. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Volume 16 of Berserk, a pretty stellar entry into the series. Again, I highly recommend that you go out and seek the Berserk series. It's best not to start with Volume 16, it's best to start with Volume 1, but Miura has a lot to say in this series, and I'm always eager to continue exploring it. So if you have any thoughts on this, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion, perhaps. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this series or this author if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and giant sword-wielding travels. Farewell.